A sharp escalation today in the Iraq crisis. A U.S. official says armed drones are now flying over Baghdad to protect U.S. military advisors who are on the ground. At the same time, Iraq's government says it's buying fighter jets from Russia and Belarus and hopes to put them into action soon. Meantime, human rights groups say they have evidence of mass killings by ISIS and its Sunni allies and by Iraqi troops and their Shiite allies. And the leader of the Kurdish region in the north has now announced the virtual annexation of the oil-rich city of Kirkuk and other disputed areas in the north. Let's get the very latest from our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. Barbara, I take it more U.S. forces, military advisors heading to the region and elsewhere.
More U.S. troops, U.S. Marines on the way to the Arabian Gulf. Wolf, the USS Bataan, with 1,000 Marines on board, is now moving. We have learned from its position in the Mediterranean back down south. It will go into the Persian Gulf with those 1,000 Marines joining another 1,000 Marines already in the Gulf region. 7 warships are already there. They are upping the firepower, they say, not because they expect President Obama to order airstrikes, but to be ready just in case. And the just in case comes along with those armed drones now flying over Baghdad. They've been conducting reconnaissance missions, but by putting missiles on them, they will be ready if those 180 military advisors from the United States run into trouble on the ground. If they come under attack, the armed drones will be on station, ready to render help to them. More military advisors could be on the way next week. You know, the president said up to 300. Right now, it's at 180. Wolf?
Barbara, thank you. Let's bring in Douglas Ollivant. He's with the New America Foundation. He's a retired U.S. Army officer who held a key planning role in Iraq, later was director for Iraq at the National Security Council in both the Bush and Obama administrations. He's a managing partner with Mantit International, which has clients in security, aerospace, and defense. Also with us, CNN counterterrorism analyst Philip Mudd, a former CIA official, now with the New America Foundation. Our foreign affairs reporter Elise Labott, and Andrew Tabler, a Syria expert at the Washington Institute here. Even as we're speaking, the Kurds, they're making it clear their so-called autonomous region in the north is expanding. They've taken over Kirkuk, Andrew, as you know, and Masoud Barzani, the head of the Kurdistan, he says they're not leaving. That's part of Kurdistan right now. It looks like they're trying to create, if they haven't already, an independent state out of Iraq.
There's a lot of concern among the Kurdish community. I think that they're trying to secure as much territory as possible, and they're laying down claims as ISIS is laying down counterclaims to other territory. And it shows really how this can sort of spin out of control a little bit faster than we thought.
Philip, does it really make much of a difference to the U.S. if Iraq is Iraq, as we've known it all these past 100 years or so, or if it becomes 3 independent countries, Kurdistan, a Shia country, a Sunni country?
I think if you look at how we've tried to look at these situations around the world, where we're looking at Horn of Africa, looking at, for example, Somalia, breakup of Somalia, our position all along has been the breakup of these countries leads to tremendous instability. In this case, you're looking at Kurdish populations in Iran, Kurdish population in Turkey. If you get the breakaway of those Kurds in the north, are you going to lead to calls for independence elsewhere? So, yeah, I think we've got a lot of interest there.
Because Syria seems to be splitting up right now in a similar fashion.
I think it is. The question, though, when we're dealing with Syria and Iraq is not necessarily just the breakup. It's, in my experience when dealing with insurgencies, is that if you get safe haven held by insurgent leaders, coupled with visionary leadership, there will be a sliver of this insurgency where foreign fighters start to train to go to places like Europe and North America. That's what we've got to worry about short term, but also long term.
What do you make of Nouri al-Maliki, Douglas? His decision now, he says, well, the U.S. is not providing fighter jets to Iraq. I'm going to go to Russia. I'm going to go to Belarus and do what I can to get some fighter jets.
This is pretty normal behavior for him. He gets very, very frustrated with the speed with which the United States delivers weapons. Half the fault in Iraq's case is generally the Iraqis. About half is the fact that it is a slow system. And every time something doesn't come fast enough, he talks about going to usually the former Soviet republics to go get some more weapons.
And he seems to at least to be blaming the United States for the current problems. His military collapses in the face of a few thousand ISIS militants who come in from Syria into Iraq, take over Mosul. They run away. The But he says if the U.S. had done what he wanted, provide these planes earlier, it would have been a different situation right now. He's not showing a whole lot of gratitude to the United States for the commitment the U.S. made over the years, training and equipping the Iraqi military.
Or that they're about to make and are making right now. I mean, that's what's really annoying U.S. officials. Not that they're getting weapons from Russia, although they're not really thrilled with what Russia's doing with Ukraine or Syria or anywhere else, but that they don't see this primarily as a problem that the Iraqi military doesn't have enough weapons or isn't trained. They think it's a lack of loyalty to Maliki, a political vacuum that ISIS has been able to exploit, and that's really what they see as the problem.
And it's interesting, Philip, he's saying these things only a few days after he met with the Secretary of State, John Kerry, who went to Baghdad and tried to encourage him to do the right thing.
Yeah, let's have a reality check here. We've got a Shia-led government. We've got a 900-mile border with Iran, which is supplying a lot of assistance to the Iraqis behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. We've got an ally to the west, that is Syria, that had started bombing militant locations across the border. What's Maliki to do? He's going to sit there and say, I've got an ally to the west, ally to the east. The Americans are saying, do something differently that's going to affect my security, that is, give up more power. I can tell you what he's going to tell Secretary Kerry. Thanks a lot for visiting, but I've got more immediate concerns I got to address.
And he's also welcoming Bashar al-Assad, you're an expert on Syria, Andrew. Bashar al-Assad coming in with their planes to bomb ISIS targets in Iraq, even though yesterday the Syrian Air Force, they killed about 50 Iraqi civilians and injured a lot more.
That's right. Bashar al-Assad hasn't bombed ISIS in nearly a year. He actually prefers, in Syria, he prefers to hit moderates instead. It's about time that he owns up a little bit to this problem. And I think at this point, though, simply bombing your way out of this is very difficult.
Does it make sense for the U.S. now to provide $500 million to moderate Syrian rebels fighting Bashar al-Assad and ISIS, for that matter, in Syria? $500 million to train and equip these rebels.
It does, because I think this is a very long-term problem that we have to deal with, and the only way, I think, to really fully deal with it is you have to get the Sunni population on side. And in Syria, you have a much larger percent of the population, about 65%.
You think it makes sense?
I think it's something we should explore, but you're playing with fire. Giving weapons to anyone in this region, you just never know where those weapons are going to end up. On the other hand, it doesn't appear like everybody has weapons already anyway.
Because that's the sense I get from officials, that they're going to give these rebels weapons. At least let me let you answer. But you know what? Just like a lot of American weapons in Mosul wound up in the hands of ISIS, tanks, armored personnel carriers, mortars, whatever. The U.S. provides these rebels in Syria stuff. It could wind up in the hands of the bad guys.
Well, and it has before, and it could again. And there's also a question of whether it's a little bit too little, too late. You know, there doesn't really seems to be a strategic vision right now. The U.S. clearly is trying to fight ISIL, and now when Secretary Kerry just met with the head of the Syrian opposition, Ahmed Jarba, said that the opposition could really be strong in fighting ISIS. But is there really to fight ISIS? Is it to get rid of Assad? It doesn't really seem, it kind of seems a little bit like a whack-a-mole situation.
Yeah. Well, we have these multiple problems that are all intertwined. We have a problem with ISIL, and even if this occurred somewhere else, we would still care about that. And then we want Iraq to stay together, try to fix its dysfunctional politics. And then, oh, by the way, we would really like Assad to go still.
ISIL, ISIS, the same thing, right. Same bunch of operations, slightly different name. All right, guys, thanks very much for coming in.